There are places in Michigan where the ground remembers things science hasn't fully decoded. Beneath forests, shorelines, and quiet fields, strange stone formations and ancient copper traces appear like intentional marks left behind by an unknown hand. Earthworks defy expected patterns, artifacts surface in places they shouldn't, and every discovery seems to ask a question no timeline can answer. What kind of presence once moved through this land, leaving behind signals we are still struggling to interpret? Stay with us as we step into 2 hours of discoveries that refuse simple explanation. In the heart of a rugged, windswept plateau in southern Palestine lies a formation known among locals as the Devil's Soup Bowl, a deep, circular depression carved into the earth, its edges jagged and steep, as if some colossal hand had scooped a portion of the land away. From a distance, it appears almost serene, a quiet hollow surrounded by rocky cliffs, wild grasses swaying gently in the breeze. But the closer you approach, the more it evokes a sense of unease, a feeling that beneath its calm surface, something ancient and unknowable persists. Geologists have long studied the formation, noting its unusual shape and depth. The standard explanation is that it is a natural sinkhole formed over millennia as water slowly eroded the limestone bedrock beneath. Measurements reveal layers of sediment that suggest the bowl may have existed for tens of thousands of years. Fossilized remains of small animals and ancient plant matter have been found within, offering a window into a landscape long vanished. Yet even with these tangible clues, questions linger. Why does the bowl exhibit such perfectly rounded symmetry, a feature rarely seen in ordinary sinkholes? And why do local winds sometimes swirl violently at its center, producing an eerie low hum that seems almost unnatural? Archaeologists have also found traces of human activity along the bowl's rim, primitive stone tools, fragments of pottery, and the occasional charred hearth. These discoveries hint at a time when people may have considered the site sacred, or at least significant, though no written records exist to explain its importance. Some scholars suggest that ritual gatherings might have taken place here, ceremonies intended to appease forces beyond human understanding. Others propose that the bowl could have served as a natural amphitheater, a place for storytelling or communal gatherings, its acoustics amplifying even the quietest sounds. But even these plausible explanations fail to capture the full weight of the mystery. Legends surrounding the Devil's Soup Bowl stretch back centuries. Local lore speaks of shadows that move against the wind, whispers that echo from nowhere, and strange lights flickering at twilight. Travelers have described sudden chills and a profound sense of being watched when standing near its edge. These stories, of course, cannot be verified scientifically, yet their consistency across generations raises a question. Could there be something more at work here than geology or human imagination alone? Some fringe theories go further, proposing that the bowl may mark a site of cosmic significance. Ancient maps of the region, drawn long before modern borders, hint at circular formations interpreted by some as points of celestial alignment. Could the Devil's Soup Bowl have been positioned deliberately, its proportions and orientation reflecting the movement of the sun or stars in the heavens? If so, what purpose did this alignment serve? Were ancient peoples attempting to communicate with the divine, or simply measuring the universe as they understood it? Even modern scientific equipment struggles to fully explain the bowl. Ground-penetrating radar reveals anomalies beneath the surface, dense, irregular formations that do not match the surrounding geology. Seismic surveys detect echoes of structures or voids whose origin remains uncertain. Some researchers argue these are mere natural quirks, but others are cautious, noting that nature can sometimes produce features that border on the inexplicable. Standing at the rim today, the Devil's Soup Bowl offers no answers. Only questions linger, pressing gently against the mind. What forces shaped this hollow so precisely? Why does it resonate with a strange energy that persists through time? And what stories of the past remain hidden in its depths, waiting for someone patient enough to uncover them? The bowl is at once a place of quiet beauty and profound mystery, a reminder that even in a world seemingly mapped and measured, some corners resist understanding. Perhaps the true story of the Devil's Soup Bowl lies not in certainty, but in the questions it continues to inspire, inviting each visitor to ponder what might still be concealed beneath the surface of the earth and within the depths of human curiosity. As the echoes of the Devil's Soup Bowl fade into memory, our journey shifts northeastward to a dense woodland along the Lake Huron shoreline of Michigan. Here, partially hidden beneath the moss and shadows of towering pines, lie the Sanilac Petroglyphs, a quiet expanse of flat, glacially smoothed rock etched with symbols that have survived centuries of wind, water, and human passage. Approaching the site, the first impression is one of stillness, almost reverence. The rocks themselves seem to hold a memory, a silent language frozen in stone, waiting to be read. Each carving is faint yet deliberate, their grooves catching the light in ways that suggest movement as the sun arcs across the sky. Scholars have studied the Sanilac petroglyphs for decades, yet their origin and purpose remain elusive. Estimates suggest they may date as far back as 1000 to 1500 BC, though the exact timeline is difficult to determine. Indigenous peoples of the region are known to have used these lands for hunting, gathering, and spiritual practices, and it is widely accepted that the petroglyphs were created by Native American groups long before European contact. Yet even with this contextual understanding, the meaning of the carvings defies simple interpretation. Anthropologists note recurring patterns: spirals, circles, humanoid figures, and animal forms. Some resemble fish or turtles, while others appear almost abstract, geometric, or otherworldly. Are these images purely symbolic, or did they serve a practical function, perhaps as maps, calendars, or instructional tools? One of the most striking aspects of the Sanilac petroglyphs is the sheer variety of techniques employed. Some figures are deeply incised, carved with a precision that suggests careful planning and significant effort. Others are shallow, almost tentative, as though the carver was experimenting or communicating something less permanent. Weathering has softened many of the lines, yet even in decay, a sense of intentionality remains. The rocks seem alive with the gestures of their creators, as though the very act of carving was meant to connect human hands to forces beyond the visible world. Historians and archaeologists often turn to context for explanation. Nearby riverbanks, lakes, and fertile hunting grounds would have been vital for survival, and the petroglyphs may have functioned as territorial markers or spiritual beacons. Some scholars propose that the carvings were part of sacred rituals, ceremonies meant to honor the spirits of the land or the cycles of nature. Yet these interpretations, while compelling, do not answer every question. Why were some petroglyphs positioned in areas rarely trodden, inaccessible without effort? And why do certain symbols appear repeatedly, not only at Sanilac but across distant sites in Michigan and the greater Great Lakes region? Could there have been a shared system of meaning, a network of knowledge transmitted across generations and geography? Local legend adds another layer to the mystery. Long before modern visitors arrived, stories circulated among indigenous communities about spirits who guarded the stones, guiding those who approached with respect and caution, but turning away those who came with trivial intent. Travelers and researchers alike report subtle sensations, an unexplainable coolness, the whisper of wind through the trees that seems to carry the faint echo of voices. While these experiences cannot be quantified, they contribute to the enduring aura of the site, a quiet insistence that the carvings are more than mere art. scientific methods have attempted to probe the unknown. Analysis of tool marks indicates the use of stone chisels, yet some grooves are unusually uniform, leading a few researchers to speculate whether techniques have been lost to time. Lichen growth and weathering patterns have helped estimate age, but questions remain. Could some of the carvings predate current estimates, hinting at an earlier civilization whose traces have largely vanished? Some fringe theories suggest connections to far-reaching trade routes or migration patterns, positing that the symbols encode knowledge of astronomy, environmental cycles, or even spiritual cosmology. While mainstream scholarship maintains caution, the repetition of motifs across distant sites invites curiosity. Was there a shared language, a cultural memory embedded in stone? Standing among the petroglyphs today, one cannot help but notice the interaction of nature and art. Sunlight filters through the leaves, illuminating certain figures while leaving others in shadow. Rain pools in carved depressions, reflecting the sky above. Wind sweeps across the rock surface, carrying dust and leaves into the shallow grooves, as if time itself is participating in the ongoing creation of the work. These elements, acting in concert over centuries, create a dynamic, living tableau. The petroglyphs are not static. They respond to the passage of days, seasons, and years, quietly asserting their presence and resisting full comprehension. What did the original creators intend? Were these carvings maps, guides, or sacred symbols meant only for those initiated into a particular knowledge? Or were they expressions of human curiosity, attempts to communicate with forces unseen, to leave a mark upon the world that would endure long after the carver's own life had ended? And if such messages were intended, what knowledge has been lost, swallowed by time and earth? As our exploration continues from the Devil's Soup Bowl to the Sanilac Petroglyphs, the pattern is clear. Michigan's ancient landscapes hold layers of meaning that blend fact with uncertainty, science with legend, the observable with the inexplicable. Each site invites reflection and speculation, challenging observers to look beyond the surface, to listen to what the stones, soil, and winds might reveal. Perhaps the true value lies not in finding definitive answers, but in cultivating the awareness that history is a dialogue between past and present, nature and humanity, the known and the unknowable. And so, as we trace the faint lines etched into Sanilac's stones, one cannot help but wonder, what secrets have been intentionally left for us to uncover, and which ones remain deliberately concealed, preserved in stone until a time when understanding might finally catch up with human curiosity. From the quiet stones of Sanilac, our journey moves southwest along the rugged contours of Michigan's landscape, where the land gently rises from river valleys and lake shores, revealing a landscape shaped both by nature and by the hands of those who came long before us. Here, on a plateau overlooking the waters of Grand Traverse Bay, lie the Battle Point Burial Mounds, an ancient complex of earthen rises rising subtly yet unmistakably above the surrounding forest floor. Unlike the sharp contours of the Devil's Soup Bowl or the flat, etched surfaces of Sanilac, these mounds are soft, rolling, almost organic in their appearance, their outlines blending with the gentle slopes of the terrain. Yet for those who know what to look for, the placement and shape of each mound suggests deliberate design, a silent testament to a people whose rituals and knowledge have largely been lost to time. Walking among the mounds, one is struck first by their scale. Some are small, barely distinguishable from natural rises in the earth. Others are more substantial, elongated or conical, their profiles rising several feet above the forest floor. The largest may have been intended to mark prominent positions on the landscape, visible from across the bay on clear days. Layers of soil, charcoal fragments, and occasional artifacts discovered during archaeological surveys suggest ceremonial or funerary purposes. Carbon dating of some material places their construction around 1000 to 1500 BC, situating the mounds within a period of profound cultural activity across the Great Lakes region. Yet, even with scientific data in hand, the intentions behind these structures remain elusive, leaving room for speculation, interpretation, and awe. Historians emphasize that the Battle Point burial mounds belong to what is broadly categorized as the woodland culture, a group known for mound-building practices throughout the eastern United States. Excavations have revealed burials interred with modest grave goods, beads, stone tools, and occasionally copper ornaments, suggesting a society with complex social and spiritual traditions. But questions persist. Why these particular shapes, these precise alignments, and this specific location? The mound's proximity to the water and their apparent orientation toward certain celestial points hint at connections to cosmology, environmental awareness, or ancestral veneration. Were the builders marking seasonal cycles, the positions of the sun and moon, or perhaps charting a celestial calendar in ways that we can no longer fully interpret? Local lore and oral traditions add another layer of mystery. Indigenous accounts speak of sacred ground, of ancestors whose presence can still be felt among the mounds. Early European settlers reported stories of lights and sounds at dusk, flickering glows and soft, indistinct voices seemingly rising from the earth. Though such reports cannot be scientifically verified, their persistence through generations suggests that the mounds were more than practical burial sites. They were places charged with meaning, where the veil between the living and the departed may have been perceived as thin. Could it be that the Battle Point mounds were not just cemeteries, but ceremonial centers designed to connect the physical world with something beyond human understanding? Archaeological methods have shed light on some aspects, yet raise further questions. Ground-penetrating radar surveys reveal cavities within some mounds, suggesting layered construction techniques and deliberate placement of materials. Soil stratigraphy indicates that the mounds were built over extended periods, perhaps centuries, with care taken to maintain their shapes and positions. Tools used in their construction remain difficult to identify with certainty, implying a mastery of engineering and labor organization that challenges assumptions about the capabilities of woodland cultures. Some researchers have proposed that these mounds functioned not only as burial sites, but as territorial markers, signifying control over prime hunting and fishing grounds. Others suggest ritual significance, ceremonial spaces where spiritual leaders mediated between the living and the ancestors. Yet beyond these grounded explanations lies a spectrum of more speculative inquiry. Observers have noted alignments between the mounds and solar phenomena, particularly the solstices, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of the movements of celestial bodies. Could these earthen forms have served as astronomical observatories or sacred calendars, blending practical survival knowledge with spiritual practice? Others have pointed to curious patterns in the placement of the mounds, clusters arranged in triangular or circular formations, forming shapes discernible only from a distance or from above. Were these designs intentional, symbolic, or simply coincidental? And if they were symbolic, what messages or meanings were encoded into the land itself, visible only to those with the right cultural or spiritual lens to interpret them? Adding to the intrigue is the context of the surrounding landscape. Battle Point itself commands a view over the bay, a vantage point that would have been strategic both practically and symbolically. Waterways served as highways for travel, trade, and communication. The placement of the mounds may reflect both a desire to honor the dead and to assert presence within a network of human activity spanning the region. Moreover, artifacts discovered near the mounds include items of distant origin, stone types not native to northern Michigan, and fragments resembling trade goods from regions hundreds of miles away. Such findings suggest connections with distant communities, raising questions about the movement of ideas, objects, and rituals across the ancient Great Lakes. Were the builders isolated groups working in relative solitude, or part of a wider cultural and spiritual network whose traces remain largely obscured? Even today, visitors to Battle Point report a subtle, almost palpable sense of presence. Standing atop the largest mound, the wind carries the scent of pine and lake water, and the horizon stretches seemingly without end. One can imagine the builders laboring here under similar skies, their hands shaping earth in reverence or necessity, their thoughts directed toward forces or beings we can scarcely imagine. There is a profound quiet, a stillness that is almost unnerving, as though the land itself remembers centuries of devotion, ritual, and life. Could this sensation be a product of the landscape, or a residual echo of human experience, lingering across the ages? Despite decades of study, the mounds resist full explanation. Every excavation, every survey, every carbon date and artifact recovery provides fragments of insight, yet the overall purpose remains unresolved. Were these ceremonial sites, territorial markers, astronomical observatories, or multi-purpose spaces blending social, spiritual, and practical functions? Or is it possible that their true meaning was never meant to be fully understood, intentionally veiled by the builders to ensure that only those with the proper initiation, knowledge, or respect could perceive it? As sunlight shifts across the mounds, shadows reveal subtle details, lines of erosion tracing the contours of the original construction, depressions hinting at buried chambers, and patches of vegetation that suggest previous human activity. The interplay of light, earth, and memory creates a tableau that is constantly changing, never fixed. Just as the Devil's Soup Bowl challenged our understanding of natural formation, and the Sanilac Petroglyphs defied definitive interpretation, Battle Point invites us to ponder not only what these mounds were, but why they were built with such care and intention. Perhaps the true significance of the Battle Point burial mounds lies not in the artifacts we recover or the theories we propose, but in the questions they provoke. What knowledge has been lost with the passing of time? What rituals, beliefs, or cosmologies shaped these constructions, and how did they guide the lives of those who built and revered them? And if these mounds were designed to endure, to communicate across generations, what messages remain embedded within the earth, waiting for discovery? In the end, the Battle Point burial mounds exemplify the tension between what we can know and what may forever remain a mystery. They remind us that Michigan's ancient landscapes are not merely archaeological sites. They are living narratives, quiet witnesses to human ingenuity, devotion, and curiosity. As we trace the contours of each mound, consider the artifacts within, and imagine the lives of those who walked these lands millennia ago, we are invited into a dialogue across time. The mounds speak in silence, in shadow, in the subtle alignment of earth and sky, leaving each observer with the question that has endured for generations. What truths remain hidden, and what wisdom did the builders intend for us to find? From the solemn earthen forms of Battle Point, we turn our attention northwest, following the meandering waterways and dense forests of Michigan to a site whose quiet presence has puzzled scholars for generations: the Black River Archaeological Site. Nestled along a broad, slow-moving section of the Black River, the area is framed by towering hardwoods and low, misty hills, their reflections shimmering in the water like fragments of memory. At first glance, it appears unremarkable, a stretch of riverbank that could easily be passed by unnoticed. But closer inspection reveals a landscape shaped not just by time and nature, but by human hands, centuries before the arrival of modern settlements. Here, the traces of ancient activity persist, subtle yet undeniable, forming a tapestry of mystery that has confounded archaeologists, historians, and local inhabitants alike. Walking along the bank, The first evidence emerges in the form of stone alignments and scattered artifacts partially submerged in sandbars and gravel deposits. Flint fragments, carefully knapped and worn by use, hint at tool-making practices. Pottery shards, decorated with incised lines and abstract patterns, suggest domestic or ceremonial use. Carbon dating of organic residues places some of the earliest activity here at approximately 1200 to 800 BC, though other findings may indicate even older human presence. Yet despite these tangible artifacts, the site resists categorization. Unlike the clearly defined mounds of Battle Point or the geometric carvings at Sanilac, the Black River site offers an enigmatic irregularity, stone structures whose purpose is uncertain, and a scattered assortment of objects whose placement raises more questions than answers. One of the most intriguing features is a series of stone circles and small terraces, partially eroded by centuries of seasonal flooding. Some circles are composed of carefully arranged boulders, their dimensions remarkably uniform. Others appear almost accidental, formed by natural rock formations, yet subtly altered by human hands. Archaeologists debate whether these were simple work areas, temporary shelters, or ceremonial constructions designed to align with environmental or celestial phenomena. Could the builders have been marking the river's flow, signaling changes in the seasons, or perhaps establishing a sacred connection between land and water? And if so, what rituals might have been enacted here, lost entirely to history? The river itself seems to hold the key to the site's mysteries. Its course has shifted over millennia, carving new channels and depositing silt, yet some formations appear deliberately sited to take advantage of the water's flow. Charcoal and burnt stone found in shallow pits suggest controlled fires, perhaps for cooking, signaling, or ritual purification. Small fish bones, seeds, and fragments of nuts indicate sustained human presence, suggesting that this was more than a transient campsite. It was a location of significance, possibly a focal point for a wider network of settlements. Still, no definitive pattern emerges. The placement of stones, pits, and artifacts seems too deliberate to be entirely random, yet lacks the clear order of typical domestic or defensive sites. What has made the Black River site particularly challenging for researchers is the blend of natural and artificial features. Glacial activity in the region produced an abundance of boulders, gravel bars, and terraces, many of which mimic human modification. Distinguishing between natural formations and intentional design requires painstaking analysis, yet even with modern tools, some structures defy explanation. Certain arrangements suggest a form of symbolic communication, a proto-writing, a map, or perhaps a record of astronomical observations. Some researchers speculate that the site may have served as an early ceremonial center, a place where environmental awareness, spiritual practice, and social coordination intersected. Could the people who shaped this riverside landscape have possessed knowledge of hydrology, astronomy, and seasonal cycles that we can scarcely reconstruct today? Local traditions lend further intrigue. Indigenous oral histories speak of spirits inhabiting the river, guardians of the land and water who influenced where people hunted, fished, and settled. Early settlers described strange patterns in the landscape, including low ridges and stone alignments that seemed to repeat natural formations elsewhere, almost as if the builders were echoing the patterns of the forest, hills, and river in their constructions. Some have even suggested that the site held knowledge meant to be preserved and transmitted only to those with the proper understanding, a coded message from one generation to the next. What secrets did the original inhabitants intend to leave behind, and why were some features so deliberately hidden or subtle that they could easily be overlooked by the casual observer? Excavations have revealed occasional burial sites, though unlike the formalized mounds at Battle Point, these interments are scattered and irregular. Human remains are minimal, often represented by a single individual in association with small artifacts. The sporadic nature of the burials has led to multiple hypotheses. Perhaps the site functioned primarily as a communal or ritual center rather than a cemetery, or perhaps the water and sediment over centuries erased much of the evidence. Still, the presence of these burials suggests that Black River was not merely a place of daily survival, but one with deep social and spiritual significance. One of the most enduring enigmas lies in stone tools and artifacts that seem out of place. Certain projectile points, for example, are of types found hundreds of miles away, implying long-distance trade or contact. Other items, like unusual copper fragments, raise the possibility of ceremonial use, or perhaps symbolic display rather than practical function. Why were these objects deposited here, and what stories did they carry? Were they offerings, markers of status, or remnants of complex social networks? Each artifact adds a piece to the puzzle, yet the larger picture remains frustratingly incomplete. Modern techniques such as LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar have begun to reveal features beneath the riverbank and surrounding soil, including low terraces, circular depressions, and anomalies that could indicate walls, platforms, or other constructions. These discoveries suggest that the site may have been far larger and more complex than previously understood. Yet interpretation is difficult. Flooding, sediment shifts, and human disturbance have obscured many original forms. Could the Black River site have been a living, evolving landscape, modified over centuries for purposes we can only speculate about? And if so, what knowledge has been irrevocably lost to the passage of time? The natural environment continues to shape perception. Mist rises from the water in the early morning, shrouding the stones and terraces in a soft haze. The river's gentle murmur seems to echo human activity long past, carrying the faint impression of footsteps, voices, and ritual gestures. Even the wind contributes, rustling leaves in patterns that sometimes appear to trace the outlines of buried structures or echo the rhythms of stone alignments. It is in these moments, observing subtle interplay of nature and artifact, that the full mystery of the Black River site becomes apparent. It is not merely an archaeological location, but a living interaction between humans, water, earth, and sky, one that continues to evolve and resist easy explanation. Questions multiply with every step. Why was this precise stretch of river chosen for such a complex array of structures and artifacts? Were these patterns understood universally among local populations, or reserved for a select group with specialized knowledge? Did the builders perceive a spiritual or cosmological significance in the river's flow, the seasonal movements of the sun and stars, or the arrangement of nearby hills? And what might remain hidden beneath sediment, water, or vegetation, waiting for patient observation or modern technology to reveal it? Even as researchers uncover new details, the Black River Archaeological Site continues to defy conclusive interpretation. It is at once tangible and elusive, a record of human ingenuity, adaptation, and belief, yet one written in a language partially lost to time. Like the Devil's Soup Bowl, Sanilac Petroglyphs, and Battle Point burial mounds before it, Black River reminds us that Michigan's ancient landscapes are not static artifacts to be cataloged and explained, but dynamic spaces that resist easy categorization, inviting continual observation, reflection, and wonder. Standing on the riverbank today, one cannot help but sense both continuity and mystery. The water has flowed past these stones and terraces for millennia, indifferent yet inseparable from the human story embedded in the land. The trees whisper secrets that cannot be entirely heard, the earth holds impressions that cannot be fully decoded, and the artifacts hint at knowledge both practical and sacred, yet stubbornly incomplete. Perhaps the true significance of the Black River Archaeological Site lies in this very tension, the interplay of observation and uncertainty, of evidence and imagination, challenging us to engage with a past that is at once knowable and eternally mysterious. From the flowing waters of the Black River, our journey carries us further into northern Michigan. Where the forests deepen and the lakes broaden, their still surfaces reflecting the sky in shades of silver and gray. It is here, at the Indian River Archaeological District, that the landscape itself seems to whisper stories long forgotten. The district stretches across a series of small riverbanks, wetlands, and low hills, a mosaic of natural formations shaped by glacial retreat and centuries of water flow. Yet scattered across this seemingly ordinary terrain are the traces of a past that defies full comprehension. Earthworks, stone alignments, and artifact clusters that hint at a sophisticated and enigmatic culture, hidden within the ordinary beauty of the land. Approaching the river, one immediately notices the subtle undulations along its banks. At first, these appear to be natural, the result of centuries of sedimentation and erosion. But closer inspection reveals evidence of intentional construction. Low mounds of earth, small terraces cut into gentle slopes, and clusters of stones arranged with deliberate care. Archaeologists have identified these features as part of a complex network of habitation and ceremonial sites, likely occupied over several centuries. Carbon dating of charcoal fragments from hearths and fires places the earliest activity here around 1300 to 800 BC, situating the site within a period of extensive settlement and mound-building activity across the Great Lakes. Yet for all the data we have, the purpose and organization of the Indian River sites remain elusive, shrouded in both time and nature. Artifacts recovered from the district provide tantalizing clues. Flint tools and projectile points suggest daily survival activities: hunting, fishing, and food preparation. Pottery fragments indicate domestic life, while unusual stone objects, some polished, some rough, suggest symbolic or ceremonial use. Some stones appear intentionally shaped and arranged in circles or parallel lines, reminiscent of distant mound sites, yet their irregular distribution challenges conventional interpretations. Were these markings and arrangements purely functional, or did they serve a deeper purpose, perhaps spiritual or social? And if so, what knowledge guided their construction, now lost to centuries of sediment, flood, and growth? The river itself is inseparable from the site's story. Seasonal flooding created natural terraces and islands, providing both sustenance and opportunities for deliberate design. Evidence of small canals, dugouts, and raised walkways has been suggested, though confirmation remains difficult due to shifting soil and water patterns. Some researchers propose that the river's course was partially manipulated to create fishing traps or water channels, blending practical engineering with environmental observation. Others suggest that water may have held symbolic significance, its flow representing life cycles, spiritual cleansing, or access to other realms. Could the builders have perceived the river not just as a resource, but as a medium connecting humans to forces beyond sight? The Indian River Archaeological District also contains burial sites, though unlike the formal mounds at Battle Point, these are dispersed and often subtle, requiring careful excavation to detect. Human remains are occasionally accompanied by small artifacts, beads, carved bone fragments, and tools, indicating respect for the deceased, yet offering few hints about their social or spiritual hierarchy. Some burials are clustered, others stand alone. The absence of a standardized pattern challenges assumptions about the culture's organizational structure. Were these collective rituals, private ceremonies, or both? And what beliefs guided the placement of the dead within such a fluid and shifting environment? Beyond the immediate riverbanks, the district reveals stone alignments and low terraces whose purpose remains contested. Some alignments suggest astronomical observations, with certain stones appearing to mark solstices or lunar cycles. Others hint at symbolic representation, forming abstract shapes visible only from specific vantage points. Could these constructions have encoded knowledge about the seasons, navigation, or spiritual cosmology? The repetition of certain symbols and patterns across distant sites in Michigan raises further questions. Did the inhabitants of Indian River participate in a wider cultural network, sharing designs, rituals, or sacred knowledge across hundreds of miles? Local lore adds layers of intrigue to the archaeological findings. Indigenous oral traditions speak of sacred sites along the river, places where spirits of the ancestors lingered, and where certain behaviors or rituals were required to avoid misfortune. Early European settlers recorded sightings of faint embers burning atop mounds, mysterious lights reflecting off the water, and the sounds of voices that seemed to come from nowhere. Though such accounts cannot be verified scientifically, their consistency across centuries hints at a long-standing recognition of the river's unusual nature. Could these experiences reflect spiritual sensitivity to the land, or remnants of cultural memory encoded in the environment itself? Scientific investigation has yielded tantalizing yet incomplete insights. Ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR surveys reveal anomalies beneath the surface, subtle depressions, linear formations, and irregular densities that may indicate former structures or ceremonial platforms. Soil analysis shows layered construction, with terraces and embankments built over multiple periods. Pollen studies indicate a mix of cultivated and wild plants, suggesting intentional management of the landscape for sustenance, ritual, or both. Yet despite these discoveries, the full significance of the site remains frustratingly out of reach. How much of the original design was altered by floods, erosion, and centuries of plant growth? And what messages, if any, were intended to survive within these carefully placed stones and terraces? The district's artifact distribution is equally perplexing. Tools and ceramics suggest daily life, yet certain objects, copper fragments, exotic stones, and unusually shaped implements, appear out of place, as though they were meant to stand apart from routine use. Some scholars suggest these were trade items, signaling far-reaching connections with distant communities. Others speculate that they were ritual offerings, left intentionally in precise locations for spiritual or ceremonial purposes. Were these objects markers of status, symbols of belief, or part of a complex system of knowledge now lost? The presence of materials from distant regions implies that the inhabitants of Indian River were part of a broader cultural network, yet the nature and extent of that network remain speculative. Natural cycles continue to shape the perception of the site today. Morning mist rises from the river, shrouding the terraces and stone alignments in a soft veil. Sunlight dances across water and moss-covered rocks, creating shifting patterns that hint at hidden details. Wind rustles through the trees, echoing across the low mounds and terraces, sometimes producing an almost musical resonance with the stone formations. In these moments, it becomes clear that the Indian River site is not simply a static record of past activity. It is a living landscape, shaped by water, wind, and human hands, whose meaning evolves with every season and every visitor. Standing among the stones and riverbanks, one cannot help but reflect on the human presence preserved here across millennia. What guided the builders as they shaped terraces, arranged stones, and selected burial sites? Were these actions grounded in practicality, spirituality, or a combination of both? And why were certain features deliberately subtle, visible only to those who approached with care or specific knowledge? The answers are elusive, yet the questions themselves evoke a sense of connection to a people whose lives, beliefs, and practices resonate faintly but persistently through the landscape. Even with modern archaeological methods, the Indian River Archaeological District continues to challenge understanding. Its combination of domestic, ceremonial, and symbolic features defies easy classification. The interplay of natural and artificial, practical and spiritual, past and present, suggests a culture deeply attuned to the land, its cycles, and perhaps forces unseen. Could these terraces and alignments represent knowledge deliberately encoded in the landscape, meant to endure across generations? And if so, what part of that knowledge can we hope to recover, and what remains hidden beneath centuries of sediment, water, and growth? As our exploration progresses from the Black River to the Indian River Archaeological District, a clear pattern emerges. Michigan's ancient landscapes are dense with human intention, layered with both visible and hidden meaning, and resistant to complete interpretation. Each site challenges us to look beyond the obvious, to consider not only what is present, but also what may have been lost, deliberately obscured, or simply erased by the passage of time. Perhaps the true significance of Indian River lies not in fully deciphering its construction, but in cultivating the capacity for wonder, an acknowledgement that some questions, unanswerable as they may be, are worth asking, generation after generation. And so, as we trace the subtle terraces, examine the scattered artifacts, and listen to the gentle flow of the river, one cannot help but ask, what knowledge did the builders of Indian River intend to preserve? How much of their understanding of nature, cosmos, and spirituality has endured? And what secrets remain buried here, waiting for a careful observer to notice them as the river continues to flow quietly, carrying the echoes of a culture that both existed and remains profoundly mysterious to this day? As we step away from the waters of the Indian River, the subtle artistry of the landscape becomes ever more striking. Terraces, low mounds, and stone alignments speak of human intention carefully woven into the natural world, leaving traces of a culture that observed, shaped, and revered its surroundings with remarkable sophistication. Each feature, no matter how small, seems deliberately placed, hinting at rituals, knowledge, and connections now largely lost to time. The interplay of river and terrain suggests a deep understanding of natural cycles. Seasonal flooding, terraces, and waterways provided both sustenance and opportunity for ingenuity, whether in practical engineering, symbolic alignment, or spiritual practice. The builders appear to have treated the river not just as a resource, but as an active partner in the creation of sacred and functional spaces. Artifacts scattered throughout the district illuminate aspects of daily life and ceremonial activity. Flint tools, pottery shards, and exotic stones hint at survival, artistry, and long-distance exchange, while certain objects stand apart, suggesting symbolic or ritual significance. These items, both mundane and extraordinary, offer glimpses into a culture that balanced practicality with profound spiritual or social expression. Yet the site resists simple interpretation. Burials are dispersed and irregular. Stone alignments hint at astronomical observations or symbolic codes, and terraces defy easy explanation. The apparent randomness and subtlety of these features challenge our assumptions, reminding us that the knowledge encoded here may have been intended for a select few, visible only to those who understood the culture's logic and symbolism. Local oral traditions and historical accounts layer the site with additional mystery. Tales of flickering lights, whispered voices, and ethereal phenomena suggest that Indian River was recognized as special long before modern archaeologists arrived. These stories may reflect spiritual memory, cultural preservation, or a human sensitivity to landscapes charged with ancestral presence. Modern techniques like LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar reveal further hidden structures, yet interpretation remains tentative. Soil analysis, pollen studies, and artifact mapping hint at intentional management of both land and ritual, yet much has been obscured by centuries of natural change. The complexity of the site underscores a culture that was attuned to both the physical and the metaphysical, a culture whose knowledge may never be fully recovered. The Indian River Archaeological District challenges us to expand our understanding of human creativity and environmental attunement. Its terraces, mounds, and alignments suggest a deliberate encoding of knowledge, practical, spiritual, and perhaps cosmological, into the land itself. Walking these riverbanks, one feels both the presence of a lost culture and the subtle pulse of a landscape designed to communicate across generations. Ultimately, Indian River endures as a testament to human intention intertwined with nature. the river flows on, carrying not just water but echoes of those who shaped its terraces, stones, and shores. Some secrets remain buried, some knowledge lost, yet the site invites continual reflection, wonder, and careful observation. Its mysteries linger, waiting for patient eyes and open minds to glimpse the faint traces of a people who left their mark both visibly and invisibly upon the land. As the waters of the Indian River fade behind us, our journey turns westward, tracing the subtle ridges and forests of northern Michigan, where the landscape shifts from river valleys to gently rolling uplands. It is here, in the quiet forests and low hills surrounding the modern town of Kalkaska, that we encounter one of Michigan's most enigmatic and haunting sights, the Kalkaska burial mounds. Rising from the earth in gentle, grass-covered humps, these mounds are both unassuming and extraordinary. From a distance, they seem like natural knolls, yet their careful spacing, uniformity, and orientation hint at a purpose far beyond mere coincidence. Each mound, modest in height yet commanding in presence, speaks silently of a society with beliefs, rituals, and knowledge that have largely been lost to time. Walking among the mounds, the subtle craftsmanship becomes immediately apparent. Some are elongated, others nearly circular, with gentle slopes that suggest deliberate shaping rather than the random contours of erosion. Archaeologists have noted that these structures often occupy high points in the terrain, overlooking valleys, streams, and wetlands. This elevated placement may have been practical, offering protection against seasonal flooding, but it also suggests an awareness of visual prominence, as if the mounds were meant to be seen, and perhaps revered, from afar. What was the significance of this careful placement? Were these mounds solely resting places for the dead, or did they serve broader ceremonial, territorial, or cosmological purposes? Excavations conducted over the past century have uncovered a mixture of human remains, artifacts, and organic material. Though much of the site remains undisturbed, its full extent obscured by dense forest and sediment accumulation. Carbon dating places some of the earliest burials at approximately 900 to 400 BC, situating these mounds within the later woodland period, a time marked by the expansion of complex societies across the Great Lakes. The skeletal remains suggest a mixture of ages and sexes, hinting at a communal or family-based burial practice rather than an exclusive elite interment. Accompanying grave goods include beads, stone tools, pottery fragments, and occasional copper ornaments. While these objects offer glimpses into the lives and practices of those interred, they raise further questions. Why these particular items, and why arranged in such a seemingly understated manner? The patterns of the Kalkaska mounds are perhaps their most intriguing feature. Unlike the formal, geometric alignments seen in other sites, these mounds exhibit irregular spacing and subtle orientation, which has puzzled researchers. Some clusters suggest deliberate grouping, perhaps signifying family units or social strata, while others appear isolated, raising the possibility of ritualistic separation or symbolic placement. Certain mounds seem to align with natural features, streams, ridges, or glacial deposits, prompting speculation that the builders were integrating the mounds into a larger environmental or cosmological framework. Did these people understand aspects of astronomy, topography, or seasonal cycles in ways that guided their constructions? And if so, what knowledge has been lost over the centuries? Artifacts recovered at Kalkaska offer a tantalizing mixture of practical and symbolic use. Flint tools, meticulously crafted and carefully placed, indicate subsistence activities, while pottery fragments suggest domestic and communal life. More unusual items, such as copper fragments and intricately carved stones, imply ceremonial or spiritual significance. Some scholars have noted similarities between these artifacts and objects found in distant parts of the Great Lakes region, suggesting networks of trade, communication, or shared ritual knowledge. Could these seemingly scattered mounds have been nodes in a broader cultural map, connecting Kalkaska to other communities through both material and spiritual exchange? The mounds themselves continue to resist complete interpretation. Many are partially eroded, with their original contours altered by centuries of wind, rain, and frost. Yet even in their altered state, the mounds convey a sense of deliberate craftsmanship. Some feature subtle depressions or raised edges, possibly marking internal burial chambers or ceremonial platforms. Others are surrounded by faint stone arrangements, whose purpose remains uncertain. Were these stones intended as markers for the living, guideposts for spiritual journeys, or symbolic representations of cosmological principles? The ambiguity persists, compelling observers to engage with the mounds both scientifically and imaginatively. Natural cycles and environmental context play a crucial role in shaping the Kalkaska site. Seasonal floods, glacial deposits, and the movement of wildlife have all influenced the appearance and preservation of the mounds. Pollen analysis suggests that the surrounding landscape was a mixture of forests and managed clearings, indicating intentional cultivation or resource management. Could the builders have designed the mounds to interact with these environmental elements, creating a landscape that was simultaneously functional, spiritual, and symbolic? And if so, how much of that knowledge has been erased or altered by the centuries that followed? Local oral histories provide additional layers of intrigue. Indigenous traditions describe sacred ground in the region, places where the living would seek guidance from ancestors or perform rituals to honor the dead. European settlers recorded stories of ghostly lights flickering over the mounds, strange sounds in the forest at dusk, and subtle impressions of movement along the earthworks. While such accounts cannot be verified scientifically, they suggest that the mounds were recognized as significant long before modern archaeology arrived. Could these reports reflect residual spiritual energy, cultural memory, or simply the human mind attuned to patterns and mystery in the landscape? One of the more enigmatic aspects of Kalkaska is the relationship between the mounds and water sources. Several mounds are situated near small streams or wetlands, and some show signs of terracing or stone arrangements that may have controlled water flow. Were these practical adaptations to seasonal flooding, or part of a symbolic integration of water into spiritual or ceremonial practice? The consistent proximity of mounds to these natural features suggests that the builders understood the land not merely as a backdrop, but as an active participant in their rituals and daily lives. Could the mounds have been constructed to honor or interact with these natural forces, embedding cultural meaning into the very geography of the area? Modern technology has begun to reveal further subtleties of the Kalkaska site. Ground-penetrating radar has detected subsurface anomalies, possibly indicating buried chambers, ritual pits, or foundational structures. Soil analysis has uncovered layers of burnt material, suggesting controlled fires or ceremonial offerings. Yet even with these tools, the interpretation remains tentative. Were these features purely functional, ceremonial, or both? And how did they relate to the broader cultural landscape, connecting Kalkaska to sites such as Battle Point, Black River, or Indian River? The mounds continue to evoke reflection on the intentions and knowledge of the builders. Standing atop one of the larger mounds, one can see the subtle curves of the surrounding terrain, the streams snaking through the valleys, and the dense forests stretching into the distance. It is easy to imagine the people who shaped these mounds moving through the landscape, carrying out rituals, observing the cycles of the sun and stars, and leaving traces meant to endure. Were these mounds intended as markers for the living, guides for the spirit world, or both? And what truths, practical or spiritual, might they have preserved for future generations? Even today, the Kalkaska burial mounds resist easy interpretation. Their blend of practicality and symbolism, irregularity and intentionality, challenges conventional understanding of woodland period societies. They compel us to consider the possibility of knowledge that transcends our modern frameworks, an understanding of land, water, and cosmos intertwined with ritual, community, and memory. Could it be that the builders intended these mounds as both functional spaces and vessels of cultural wisdom, designed to communicate across generations in ways we are only beginning to glimpse? As sunlight filters through the forest canopy, casting shifting shadows across the mounds, one realizes that Kalkaska, like so many other Michigan sites, is not simply a historical artifact. It is a living record of human thought, intention, and memory. The earth itself becomes a storyteller, offering hints without answers, whispers without words. Every mound, artifact, and subtle contour invites reflection, curiosity, and wonder, reminding us that the past is neither fixed nor fully accessible, but a continuum we may engage with in observation, imagination, and respect. And so, as we trace the contours of each mound, consider the artifacts within, and contemplate the lives of those who shaped this land millennia ago, we are left with questions that may never be fully answered. What knowledge, beliefs, or rituals guided the construction of the Kalkaska burial mounds? How did these mounds connect to other sites, rivers, and communities across northern Michigan? And what secrets still lie hidden beneath the soil, waiting for those patient enough to uncover them, as the forest quietly holds its ancient memory for all who are willing to listen? As we step back from the Kalkaska burial mounds, the intricate tapestry of human intention and natural harmony becomes ever clearer. These earthworks, modest yet purposeful, speak of a people who observed, understood, and shaped their environment with a subtlety that continues to inspire awe. Each mound, slope, and stone tells a story that bridges millennia, whispering of lives lived in dialogue with forests, streams, and sky. The careful placement and orientation of the mounds hint at a society deeply attuned to both practical needs and spiritual resonance. High ridges overlook valleys and wetlands, suggesting strategies for survival. Yet these same vantage points invite contemplation, reverence, and perhaps ritual observation. Such duality blurs the line between the mundane and the sacred, leaving us to ponder the intentions that guided their construction. Artifacts recovered within and around the mounds offer glimpses into daily life and ceremonial practice alike. Flint tools, pottery shards, and copper fragments reflect subsistence, trade, and artistry, while carved stones and ceremonial deposits suggest a symbolic language now largely indecipherable. These objects form a bridge between the living and the dead, the ordinary and the transcendent. Yet the irregular spacing and subtle orientation of the mounds resist straightforward interpretation. Some clusters may denote family units or social strata, while isolated mounds evoke questions of ritual separation or symbolic significance. Alignments with streams, ridges, or glacial formations imply a sophisticated awareness of landscape and perhaps cosmology, though the exact knowledge remains elusive. Environmental interplay emerges as a defining feature. Seasonal floods, forest clearings, and managed vegetation all reveal intentional adaptation to the land. The mounds were not passive structures but active participants in the broader ecosystem, integrating human activity with natural cycles, a testament to an ecological wisdom that modern observers can only begin to grasp. Local legends and historical accounts add layers of mystery. Flickering lights, faint sounds, and whispered movements through the forest hint at a lingering presence, a cultural memory that extends beyond the physical artifacts. These stories suggest that Kalkaska was recognized as sacred long before modern science sought to catalog its secrets, bridging human perception across generations. Even with modern technologies such as ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis, the Kalkaska burial mounds maintain their enigmatic allure. Subsurface anomalies, hidden chambers, and ceremonial layers invite careful study, yet definitive understanding remains just beyond reach. The site challenges observers to blend scientific inquiry with imagination, honoring the subtle intelligence embedded in the landscape. Ultimately, Kalkaska stands as a living testament to human curiosity, ritual, and adaptation. Its mounds, stones, and artifacts are more than remnants. They are vessels of memory, coded with intentions we may never fully decipher. As shadows shift across the forest floor and the wind stirs the trees, we are reminded that some secrets are meant to endure quietly, offering an open-ended dialogue between past and present for all who are patient enough to listen. Leaving the wooded hills and earth-covered mounds of Kalkaska behind, our journey takes us eastward, into a landscape dominated by gentle slopes, serene forests, and the glimmering waters of northern Michigan's lakes. Among these waterways lies a place both tranquil and enigmatic, the Indian Lake Archaeological Site. At first glance, the area appears serene and ordinary, a placid lake ringed by reeds and forests, reflecting the sky in quiet ripples. Yet beneath this calm surface, both literal and metaphorical, lie traces of human activity that reach deep into the past, raising questions that have puzzled archaeologists, historians, and local observers for decades. The site stretches along the lake's northern and western shores, where subtle terraces rise from the water's edge, interspersed with small islands and peninsulas. These landforms, shaped by glacial activity and centuries of natural erosion, conceal man-made features that become visible only under careful observation. Low ridges, clusters of stones, and depressions in the soil hint at constructions designed with purpose, a deliberate shaping of the landscape that may have served domestic, ceremonial, or symbolic functions. As we walk these shores, it is impossible not to feel a sense of continuity with those who inhabited this place long ago, leaving traces in stone, soil, and subtle alterations to the earth itself. Archaeological investigation has uncovered artifacts spanning multiple periods, suggesting that Indian Lake was a site of repeated occupation. Flint tools, pottery shards, and fire-cracked rocks speak to daily life, hunting, fishing, cooking, and tool-making. Yet scattered among these commonplace objects are anomalies, small copper fragments, carved bone tools, and stones shaped or arranged in ways that defy straightforward explanation. Some stones form low circles or lines along terraces, their exact purpose unclear. Were they markers for the living, guides for ritual activity, or representations of celestial phenomena? The evidence invites speculation, though the answers remain just beyond reach. Excavations have revealed several burial areas where human remains are accompanied by carefully placed artifacts. Unlike the more formal mounds at Kalkaska or Battle Point, these burials are often shallow, subtle, and interspersed with living areas, suggesting a complex relationship between the living and the dead. Some skeletons show signs of careful preparation and placement, while others appear arranged with less formality. This variability raises questions. Did burial practices evolve over time, reflecting changing beliefs, or did different groups use the lake in overlapping ways? And what spiritual framework guided these interments, a framework now lost to time? The relationship between the site and water is particularly striking. Indian Lake is not merely a backdrop. It seems central to the people who lived here. Archaeologists have identified remnants of small docks or platforms along the shore, and the spacing of artifacts suggests fishing and watercraft were crucial to daily life. Some researchers propose that the lake may also have held spiritual significance, a boundary between the world of the living and the unseen. Certain islands and peninsulas appear to have been used for specific rituals, evidenced by concentrations of offerings or deliberately arranged stones. Could these natural features have been perceived as sacred thresholds, connecting human activity to forces beyond observation? Perhaps the most puzzling features of Indian Lake are the stone alignments and terraces that appear throughout the district. Some form rough grids or low walls. Others are more abstract, resembling markers or symbolic arrangements. Their irregularity has challenged conventional explanations. Were these structures practical, supports for dwellings, platforms for storage, or fortifications? Or were they intentionally enigmatic, designed to encode knowledge about celestial events, seasonal cycles, or social order? Comparisons with distant sites in Michigan suggest a shared architectural vocabulary, yet local variations imply a highly contextual and nuanced understanding of landscape and environment. Artifacts further deepen the mystery. Stone tools and pottery suggest continuity with broader woodland period traditions, yet several finds defy easy categorization. Certain stones appear polished or carved, sometimes with markings that may indicate symbolic intent. Copper fragments, rare in northern Michigan, imply long-distance trade or contact with distant cultures. Were these objects part of ceremonial offerings, trade networks, or social signaling? And how did the inhabitants of Indian Lake integrate these materials into their daily and spiritual lives, blending the mundane with the sacred? Excavations have also revealed subtle evidence of land management, a deliberate shaping of forests, wetlands, and open spaces. Pollen analysis indicates a mix of cultivated plants and wild flora, suggesting an intimate knowledge of the environment. Fire pits, small terraces, and shallow ditches may have been used to control vegetation or water flow, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of ecosystem dynamics. Could it be that the builders of Indian Lake deliberately manipulated the landscape to support both sustenance and ritual, creating a space where nature and culture were inseparable? Local legends add a layer of intrigue. Native oral histories speak of spirits inhabiting the lake, guiding or warning those who approached the water. Early European settlers noted unusual lights on the lake's surface, mysterious disturbances in the water, and faint sounds carried on the wind. While such accounts cannot be verified scientifically, they echo a recognition of the site's unusual qualities that transcends generations. Could these observations reflect residual spiritual significance, or simply the human tendency to perceive patterns in the natural world? The consistency of these stories over time suggests that Indian Lake has long inspired awe and contemplation. Technological analysis continues to reveal hidden aspects of the site. Ground-penetrating radar has detected anomalies beneath the surface, subtle depressions, linear formations, and dense clusters of stone that hint at buried structures or ceremonial spaces. Soil stratigraphy shows layers of construction and repeated use, indicating that the site was occupied over centuries rather than a single generation. Some researchers suggest the possibility of deliberately buried offerings or ritual deposits, though confirmation remains elusive. How much of the site remains concealed beneath centuries of sediment, water deposition, and plant growth? And what messages, encoded in the placement of stones or artifacts, have endured across millennia? The lake itself plays an ongoing role in shaping perception. Mist often rises from its surface in the early morning, shrouding the shoreline in a silver haze. Sunlight glints off water and stones, producing fleeting patterns that vanish as the day progresses. Seasonal changes transform the landscape: ice in winter, floodwaters in spring, vibrant foliage in autumn, revealing different aspects of the site over time. This dynamic environment suggests that the builders of Indian Lake may have intended their constructions to interact with natural cycles, creating a living landscape whose meaning shifted with the seasons. Artifacts and structural features hint at a complex cultural and spiritual life. Tools, pottery, and ornaments reflect daily existence, yet the irregularity and intentionality of certain arrangements imply a symbolic or ritual dimension. Stone placements, terraces, and burial sites may have encoded knowledge about the natural world, social relationships, or cosmology? Were these messages intended to be deciphered by others, preserved for future generations, or understood only by those initiated into specific cultural or spiritual practices? The ambiguity remains a central feature of the site, prompting careful observation and respectful speculation. Walking along the lake's edge, it becomes clear that Indian Lake is more than an archaeological site. It is a palimpsest of human experience. The subtle interaction of natural and artificial features, the layering of artifacts, and the persistent traces of human intention evoke a dialogue between past and present. Who were the people who inhabited this lake? How did they perceive the world around them, and what knowledge or beliefs guided their interactions with water, land, and the cycles of nature? Every stone, terrace, and burial prompts reflection, inviting the observer to consider not only what is present, but what may have been deliberately preserved or lost. Despite decades of investigation, many mysteries persist. The irregular placement of mounds, the variety of artifacts, and the subtle stone arrangements resist easy interpretation. Ground-penetrating radar, soil analysis, and artifact comparison provide tantalizing glimpses of the past, yet the full story remains just beyond reach. Could Indian Lake have been a central node in a network of regional settlements, ritual centers, or trade routes? Were the builders recording knowledge in ways that are no longer legible, or were their constructions intended to be understood intuitively by those who inhabited the landscape? Even the environmental context raises questions. Seasonal changes in water level, forest composition, and soil fertility suggest a nuanced understanding of ecological dynamics. Did the site's inhabitants intentionally manipulate these factors, blending practical engineering with spiritual or symbolic significance? And if so, how was this knowledge transmitted across generations, shaping the continuity of life at Indian Lake for centuries? As sunlight fades across the lake and the wind stirs the reeds along its shore, one is struck by the timeless resonance of the site. The artifacts, mounds, and stone alignments are more than remnants. They are silent witnesses to human thought, ritual, and adaptation. They invite contemplation of lives lived in intimate connection with the land, water, and cosmos. And though science can reveal much, the Indian Lake Archaeological Site retains an air of mystery, reminding us that some knowledge may never be fully recovered, and some meanings may remain deliberately hidden. Ultimately, Indian Lake challenges observers to engage with both evidence and imagination. What truths did its builders seek to preserve in stone, soil, and water? How did their understanding of the environment, seasons, and spiritual world shape their choices? And what secrets still lie beneath the surface, waiting for careful eyes and patient minds to uncover them, as the lake continues to shimmer quietly in the northern Michigan landscape, holding the echoes of lives long past, yet never fully forgotten? As the sun arcs across northern Michigan, illuminating wooded hills, tranquil lakes, and limestone outcrops, the land itself seems to whisper stories of those who lived, labored, and worshipped here long before maps and modern roads ever marked the terrain. From the carefully shaped mounds of Kalkaska to the subtle terraces of Indian Lake, from the submerged stones of Grand Traverse Bay to the etched limestone of Mackinac Island, each site stands as a testament to human presence that defies time, a dialogue between people and environment that continues to echo across centuries. The mounds rise from earth and grass as if breathing, carrying within their slopes the rhythm of ceremonies, the memory of the deceased, and the ingenuity of communities who understood the cycles of life and death, the changing seasons, and the flow of rivers and lakes as extensions of their very existence. Indian Lake stretches outward, its placid surface reflecting sky and forest, yet hiding beneath ripples and reeds a labyrinth of terraces, aligned stones, and subtle depressions that suggest ritual, habitation, and a knowledge of the landscape that was both practical and spiritual. Flint tools, pottery shards, and copper fragments hint at daily life intertwined with far-reaching trade, while burial areas and stone circles suggest a cosmology in which the living and dead, earth and water, were inseparable. The lake itself emerges not merely as a resource, but as a sacred boundary, its islands and peninsulas marking thresholds where the physical and spiritual worlds intertwined, where offerings may have been left and rites performed to honor unseen forces that guided and observed. Across Grand Traverse Bay, beneath the cold, clear waters of Lake Michigan, lie stones arranged in deliberate patterns, terraces, and angular formations whose origins remain enigmatic. Divers and sonar scans reveal linear alignments and flat slabs that hint at human intention, challenging natural explanations and suggesting knowledge of both terrestrial and celestial landscapes. Were these stones foundation supports, ceremonial platforms, or early navigational markers guiding canoes across prehistoric waterways? The possibility of submerged settlements and ritual spaces raises profound questions about human ingenuity and adaptation to post-glacial environments, revealing a continuity of human interaction with water and land that spans millennia. On Mackinac Island, the petroglyphs carved into glacially smoothed limestone speak with quiet insistence. Spirals, handprints, and representations of fish and turtles form a symbolic language that may encode stories, instructions, or astronomical knowledge, their precise meaning slipping through time like shadows across stone. Positioned on slopes that catch the sun and shadows in deliberate ways, these carvings integrate environment, ritual, and observation, suggesting that the landscape itself was part of an orchestrated experience, where celestial cycles, seasonal changes, and spiritual practice converged in enduring artistry. The journey from Kalkaska through Indian Lake, across Grand Traverse Bay, and onto Mackinac Island reveals a web of interconnected human activity and perception. Landforms, water, stone, and sky were not passive backdrops. They were active participants in human endeavor, shaped, observed, and interpreted by generations whose knowledge was encoded in stone, sediment, and subtle environmental manipulation. From low ridges and mounds to submerged terraces and petroglyph-laden limestone, the imprint of human thought resonates with ingenuity, reverence, and careful adaptation to the forces of nature. These landscapes remind us that civilization is not always monumental or permanent in the conventional sense, but can be subtle, elegant, and deeply integrated with the natural world. Technology allows us to glimpse what once was hidden. Ground-penetrating radar uncovers buried structures at Indian Lake, sonar reveals submerged stones in Grand Traverse Bay, and 3D scanning brings faint petroglyphs into clarity on Mackinac Island. Yet even as these tools expand our vision, the landscapes retain an elusive power. Shadows fall differently across mounds and terraces with each season. Currents shift stones beneath the lake, and lichen slowly reclaims carved rock. Each site exists in a dynamic interplay of visibility and concealment, of presence and absence, inviting observers to look beyond the immediate and consider the broader patterns of human experience, intent, and ritual. Across these four landscapes, questions multiply. Were the mounds of Kalkaska aligned to celestial events, marking solstices and equinoxes? Did Indian Lake's terraces encode social hierarchies or ritual knowledge? What messages lie in the submerged stones of Grand Traverse Bay, invisible for centuries, waiting for those willing to dive into the depths? And how did the petroglyphs of Mackinac Island guide observers across generations in ways both practical and spiritual? Each question hints at networks of knowledge that were sophisticated, multidimensional, and intertwined with the environment, yet ephemeral enough that only traces remain for us to interpret. The landscapes themselves seem alive with memory. Sunlight glimmers across mounds, dances on lake surfaces, and shifts along carved limestone, revealing patterns that emerge and vanish with perspective. Mist rises from lakes at dawn, and wind stirs reeds along shorelines where artifacts rest. Seasonal changes uncover new details and obscure old ones, reminding us that human intention was always in dialogue with nature, a careful observation of cycles, forces, and celestial rhythms. The past is layered, hidden beneath water, earth, and vegetation, but never absent. It is always present, waiting for patient eyes and attentive minds. Ultimately, the story of northern Michigan is written not only in artifacts or monuments, but in the relationships between people and the land, water, and sky. The mounds, terraces, stones, and carvings embody thought, belief, and creativity, speaking across centuries to those willing to perceive them. They challenge assumptions, ignite imagination, and remind us that human ingenuity is often subtle, integrated, and profoundly enduring. Beneath the forests, lakes, and limestone outcrops lies a history that is both tangible and mysterious, practical and symbolic, preserved in stone, sediment, and memory. And as we stand on the shores of Indian Lake, peer beneath the waters of Grand Traverse Bay, trace the contours of Kalkaska's Mounds, or feel the grooves of Mackinac Island's petroglyphs, we realize that Michigan's ancient landscapes are not merely relics of the past. They are living archives, inviting us to engage, reflect, and wonder. They remind us that human presence endures in forms subtle and grand, visible and hidden, and that even after millennia, the dialogue between people and place continues, whispering stories, offering lessons, and preserving mysteries that call for careful observation, curiosity, and reverence. As we leave the quiet shores and hidden terraces of Indian Lake behind, our journey carries us northward, over rolling forests and limestone ridges, into the heart of the Straits of Mackinac. Here, surrounded by the deep blues of Lake Huron and Lake Michigan, lies Mackinac Island, a place of enduring natural beauty and enduring mystery. On its rugged limestone outcrops, the island hides a series of petroglyphs, etched symbols and figures that have endured for centuries, worn by wind, rain, and ice, yet still speaking with a quiet insistence. The stone surfaces glint faintly in the sunlight, their shallow grooves casting subtle shadows that shift as the day moves across the sky. It is impossible to look upon these carvings without a sense of reverence. They are silent witnesses to the lives, beliefs, and intentions of people who walked this island long before the arrival of European explorers. The Mackinac Island petroglyphs are scattered across several limestone exposures along the northern and western shores, with the largest concentration located near the island's low cliffs and glacially polished bedrock. From a distance, the markings are subtle, faint lines, depressions, and abstract forms barely distinguishable from natural cracks or fissures in the stone. Yet under careful examination, intricate patterns emerge: spirals, handprints, animal figures, and geometric shapes, each carefully incised into the rock with a precision that speaks of deliberate craftsmanship. These carvings are not haphazard. They appear to follow certain rhythms and orientations that suggest awareness of both natural and celestial patterns. Could these forms encode information about seasons, hunting cycles, or spiritual beliefs, intended to guide those who knew their meaning? Dating the petroglyphs has proven challenging. Unlike buried artifacts, rock carvings lack organic material suitable for direct radiocarbon analysis. Archaeologists rely on contextual clues, the layering of nearby sediments, the types of associated tools, and stylistic comparisons with other Great Lakes petroglyphs to estimate their age. Some carvings may date back as far as 1000 to 400 BC, situating them within the late Archaic to early Woodland periods, a time when societies across the region were experimenting with complex social structures, long-distance trade, and symbolic expression. Yet the exact chronology remains elusive. Were these carvings created over centuries by different groups, or were they the product of a concentrated cultural effort during a specific period? The ambiguity only deepens the sense of mystery. The imagery itself is both familiar and enigmatic. Spirals, concentric circles, and zigzag lines recur throughout the site, forms that are also seen in other Great Lakes petroglyphs, but vary in scale and execution. Some figures appear representational: fish, turtles, and other aquatic creatures carved with remarkable clarity, suggesting a close relationship between the people and the surrounding lakes. Other designs are abstract, difficult to interpret beyond their aesthetic or symbolic qualities. Do these shapes represent stories, maps, spiritual entities, or ritual instructions? Or were they simply expressions of aesthetic or meditative practice? The answers remain tantalizingly out of reach. Several carvings hint at astronomical awareness. Certain spirals and line patterns appear aligned with sunrise and sunset points during solstices, or with the position of prominent stars in the night sky. Could these rock faces have functioned as calendars, ceremonial markers, or observational tools for tracking seasonal cycles? While such theories remain speculative, they cannot be dismissed, especially given the widespread evidence of celestial observation among indigenous cultures in the Great Lakes region. If so, the petroglyphs may reflect a sophisticated understanding of time and space, encoded in stone for those trained to read them. The petroglyphs also reflect a remarkable integration with the natural environment. Many carvings are placed on glacially smoothed surfaces that slope toward the water, catching sunlight and shadow in ways that enhance their visibility at certain times of day. Some are located near natural depressions that collect rainwater, creating reflections that might have been used in ritual observation or spiritual practice. Could these deliberate placements indicate a worldview in which the land, water, and rock were active participants in ceremonial life? And if so, how much of this knowledge was transmitted orally, visually, or through practice, and how much has been lost to the centuries? Artifacts found near the petroglyph sites provide additional context. Stone tools, projectile points, and occasional pottery fragments suggest that the island was not only a ceremonial site, but also a place of habitation or seasonal use. Fishing, hunting, and small-scale gathering likely supported the people who carved the rocks, while the petroglyphs themselves may have marked sacred or socially significant spaces. Some carvings occur near natural caves and crevices, locations that could have provided shelter, storage, or sites for ritual activities. The interplay of daily life and symbolic expression raises questions about the boundaries between the practical and the spiritual in these ancient societies. The petroglyphs have also sparked speculation and fringe theories, though these remain unverified. Some observers have suggested connections with distant cultures, citing similarities with carvings found along the St. Lawrence River, or even as far afield as the American Southwest. Others propose that the carvings encode astronomical knowledge beyond simple seasonal tracking, potentially reflecting complex cosmologies. While these ideas are intriguing, they remain speculative. The evidence supports cautious interpretation. What is clear, however, is that the creators of these carvings engaged deeply with their environment, embedding knowledge and meaning into stone in ways that continue to captivate modern observers. Local oral histories offer additional insight. Indigenous traditions recount Mackinac Island as a place of spiritual power, where vision quests were undertaken, ancestral spirits were honored, and rituals were performed to maintain harmony with the land and waters. These narratives suggest that the petroglyphs may have been more than static images. They may have been part of a living landscape of ritual and memory, designed to guide behavior, transmit knowledge, or mark significant spiritual events. Even as centuries passed and European settlers arrived, the island retained an aura of reverence and mystery, a recognition of its significance that transcended cultural and temporal boundaries. Environmental factors continue to influence the preservation and interpretation of the petroglyphs. Frost, ice, and water erosion have softened many carvings, making some details almost invisible to the untrained eye. Lichen and moss obscure others, their green growth integrating the human markings with the natural rock in subtle, almost poetic ways. Could the placement and orientation of these carvings have accounted for such cycles of weather and seasonal change, anticipating how nature would interact with stone over generations? And how much meaning has been altered, hidden, or revealed by the relentless passage of time? Recent technological studies, including 3D scanning and high-resolution photogrammetry, have begun to reveal faint markings previously undetected, uncovering layers of carvings that may represent multiple periods of use. Some designs appear superimposed on earlier figures, suggesting that the site evolved over centuries, with new generations contributing to the record while respecting or reinterpreting the work of their predecessors. This layered approach challenges us to consider the site not as a static artifact, but as a living canvas, shaped by countless hands, eyes, and intentions. The Mackinac Island petroglyphs, while studied extensively, continue to resist definitive explanation. Are the abstract forms purely symbolic, or do they encode practical information? Were certain carvings intended for initiation rituals, spiritual instruction, or communal memory? How did the creators integrate their observations of the stars, water, and land into these markings? And what knowledge, subtle or profound, might remain unreadable to us today? These questions linger, inviting careful reflection and observation rather than hasty conclusion. Standing before a spiral carved into sun-warmed limestone, one can almost sense the presence of those who shaped it, imagining the meticulous strokes of stone against rock, the thoughtful placement of each line, and the reverence for both material and environment. Every curve, depression, and shadow invites contemplation. What stories were told here? What knowledge was encoded? And how did these carvings shape the perception and behavior of those who encountered them long ago? The petroglyphs also highlight the interconnectedness of people and place. Mackinac Island, surrounded by water, was both isolated and central, a node in broader networks of travel, trade, and cultural exchange. The petroglyphs may have served as markers for visiting groups, signaling ownership, ritual significance, or practical guidance. Could the carvings have been part of a map, literal or symbolic, guiding travelers across the waters and lands of the Great Lakes region? And if so, what knowledge did they encode that is now lost, preserved only in the faint grooves of stone? Artifacts found near the petroglyph sites provide additional context. Stone tools, projectile points, and occasional pottery fragments suggest that the island was not only a ceremonial site, but also a place of habitation or seasonal use. Fishing, hunting, and small-scale gathering likely supported the people who carved the rocks, while the petroglyphs themselves may have marked sacred or socially significant spaces. Some carvings occur near natural caves and crevices, locations that could have provided shelter, storage, or sites for ritual activities. The interplay of daily life and symbolic expression raises questions about the boundaries between the practical and the spiritual in these ancient societies. The petroglyphs have also sparked speculation and fringe theories, though these remain unverified. Some observers have suggested connections with distant cultures, citing similarities with carvings found along the St. Lawrence River, or even as far afield as the American Southwest. Others propose that the carvings encode astronomical knowledge beyond simple seasonal tracking, potentially reflecting complex cosmologies. While these ideas are intriguing, they remain speculative. The evidence supports cautious interpretation. What is clear, however, is that the creators of these carvings engaged deeply with their environment, embedding knowledge and meaning into stone in ways that continue to captivate modern observers. Local oral histories offer additional insight. Indigenous traditions recount Mackinac Island as a place of spiritual power, where vision quests were undertaken, ancestral spirits were honored, and rituals were performed to maintain harmony with the land and waters. These narratives suggest that the petroglyphs may have been more than static images. They may have been part of a living landscape of ritual and memory, designed to guide behavior, transmit knowledge, or mark significant spiritual events. Even as centuries passed and European settlers arrived, the island retained an aura of reverence and mystery, a recognition of its significance that transcended cultural and temporal boundaries. Environmental factors continue to influence the preservation and interpretation of the petroglyphs. Frost, ice, and water erosion have softened many carvings, making some details almost invisible to the untrained eye. Lichen and moss obscure others, their green growth integrating the human markings with the natural rock in subtle, almost poetic ways. Could the placement and orientation of these carvings have accounted for such cycles of weather and seasonal change, anticipating how nature would interact with stone over generations? And how much meaning has been altered, hidden, or revealed by the relentless passage of time? Recent technological studies, including 3D scanning and high-resolution photogrammetry, have begun to reveal faint markings previously undetected, uncovering layers of carvings that may represent multiple periods of use. Some designs appear superimposed on earlier figures, suggesting that the site evolved over centuries, with new generations contributing to the record while respecting or reinterpreting the work of their predecessors. This layered approach challenges us to consider the site not as a static artifact, but as a living canvas, shaped by countless hands, eyes, and intentions. The Mackinac Island petroglyphs, while studied extensively, continue to resist definitive explanation. Are the abstract forms purely symbolic, or do they encode practical information? Were certain carvings intended for initiation rituals, spiritual instruction, or communal memory? How did the creators integrate their observations of the stars, water, and land into these markings? And what knowledge, subtle or profound, might remain unreadable to us today? These questions linger, inviting careful reflection and observation rather than hasty conclusion. Standing before a spiral carved into sun-warmed limestone, one can almost sense the presence of those who shaped it, imagining the meticulous strokes of stone against rock, the thoughtful placement of each line, and the reverence for both material and environment. Every curve, depression, and shadow invites contemplation. What stories were told here? What knowledge was encoded? And how did these carvings shape the perception and behavior of those who encountered them long ago? The petroglyphs also highlight the interconnectedness of people and place. Mackinac Island, surrounded by water, was both isolated and central, a node in broader networks of travel, trade, and cultural exchange. The petroglyphs may have served as markers for visiting groups, signaling ownership, ritual significance, or practical guidance. Could the carvings have been part of a map, literal or symbolic, guiding travelers across the waters and lands of the Great Lakes region? And if so, what knowledge did they encode that is now lost, preserved only in the faint grooves of stone? As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the limestone, the petroglyphs seem to transform. Lines and spirals, once faint, are illuminated by the oblique light, revealing subtle details and inviting reflection. The carvings are not static. They interact with the environment, changing with light, weather, and perspective. This dynamic relationship between art, environment, and observer may have been intentional, a deliberate play between perception and understanding, meant to be experienced in specific conditions or at particular times. Ultimately, the Mackinac Island petroglyphs remind us that human expression transcends time and medium. They are traces of thought, belief, and creativity etched into stone, surviving long after the creators have vanished. They challenge us to consider the relationships between people, land, water, and sky, and to ponder the ways knowledge and culture can be preserved outside written language. What did these ancient artists hope to communicate? What secrets, practical or spiritual, remain embedded in the rock? And how many of these messages, layered across centuries, remain hidden from our eyes, waiting for careful observation to bring them into the light? The carvings of Mackinac Island, like the terraces of Indian Lake and the mounds of Kalkaska, invite us to linger in the question rather than rush to an answer. They are markers of a past both visible and invisible, tangible and intangible, ordinary and profound. As we continue our exploration of Michigan's ancient landscapes, the petroglyphs stand as a reminder that the land itself can be a repository of knowledge and mystery, and that each site offers lessons not only about what was, but also about how we engage with time, memory, and human ingenuity. Even after centuries of study, the Mackinac Island petroglyphs retain an enigmatic power, challenging modern observers to look, to think, and to wonder. What stories are encoded in those spirals and animal figures? What spiritual or practical purpose did they serve? And what might we still discover, hidden in the grooves of stone, awaiting the careful attention of those who seek to understand the deep history of Michigan's ancient peoples? As the sun sets across Michigan's diverse landscapes, from the rippling waters of Grand Traverse Bay to the grassy slopes of the Grand River Mounds, from the hidden terraces of Indian Lake to the glinting limestone of Mackinac Island, we are reminded that history is rarely visible at first glance. Each site, whether submerged beneath lake waters, rising subtly from river valleys, carved into rock, or layered with soil, holds fragments of human intention, belief, and ingenuity. The Grand River Mounds speak through contours and elevations, silently preserving social hierarchies, spiritual practices, and complex mortuary traditions. Nearby, the underwater stones of Grand Traverse Bay evoke human activity now lost beneath the waves, patterns of labor and ritual frozen in sediment and stone, hinting at knowledge of astronomy, environment, and ceremony. Indian Lake's hidden terraces echo with the footsteps and designs of those who shaped the land for practical and symbolic purposes, a subtle record of human adaptation and reverence. And Mackinac Island's petroglyphs, etched in limestone for centuries, remind us that human expression can endure outside of written language, carrying stories, instructions, and spiritual resonance across millennia. Together, these sites form a tapestry of time and place, each thread weaving into the next, revealing a landscape shaped as much by human imagination as by water, soil, and stone. The careful placement of mounds, stones, terraces, and carvings reflects a profound understanding of environment and celestial cycles, a recognition that life and death, earth and sky, were deeply intertwined. Across rivers and lakes, on riverbanks, limestone outcrops, and beneath waters now silent, human hands engaged with the land in ways that challenge modern assumptions about technology, ritual, and spatial awareness. These creations were practical, symbolic, and spiritual simultaneously, blurring the line between survival and belief, between observation and intention. The mysteries embedded in each site call for patient contemplation. Why were some mounds larger or aligned with distant hills? What patterns did the submerged stones mark in the lives of those who once walked where water now flows? How did the petroglyphs guide vision, memory, and ceremony across generations? Each answer hints at networks of thought, culture, and practice far more sophisticated than the stone, soil, or water might suggest. And yet, for every clue uncovered, countless questions remain. Hidden chambers beneath mounds, faint markings beneath moss, submerged terraces obscured by currents, the ephemeral movements of ritual now invisible to the eye. Indigenous oral histories tie these landscapes together, reminding us that land and water were not merely physical spaces, but living, sacred entities. Vision quests, seasonal observations, communal ceremonies, and spiritual engagement all formed a framework within which humans interacted with their environment, leaving traces that are subtle yet persistent across time. These narratives invite us to consider not only the structures themselves, but also the world views they represent, the practices encoded in soil, stone, and water, and the continuity of memory that persists even when direct knowledge has faded. Technological studies, from LiDAR scans over river valleys to sonar mapping of lake beds and 3D imaging of petroglyphs, reveal details invisible to casual observation. Subtle alignments, terraced arrangements, and layered carvings emerge, suggesting coordination, planning, and an enduring engagement with both terrestrial and celestial patterns. Even with such tools, the landscapes resist complete interpretation. They remain liminal spaces, at once familiar and alien, offering insight while withholding definitive answers, reminding us that human ingenuity often exceeds our capacity to fully comprehend it. Walking among these sites, one experiences a sense of temporal folding. The mounds, terraces, submerged stones, and petroglyphs each create a dialogue across centuries, a conversation between past and present. The lines, shapes, and arrangements convey intention, ritual, and knowledge, yet they remain tantalizingly incomplete, inviting imagination, reflection, and reverence. They teach us that history is not solely a record of events, but a conversation between people and place, one that continues to evolve as we observe, study, and wonder. Together, the landscapes of Michigan, its rivers, lakes, and islands, form an intricate archive of human experience, encoded in earth, water, and stone. They remind us that every ripple, slope, carving, and submerged stone holds potential insight into social structure, cosmology, spiritual practice, and environmental knowledge. They challenge our assumptions, expand our sense of the past, and reveal that human presence is not always immediately visible, yet profoundly persistent. As sunlight glimmers across grassy mounds, dances across lake waters, and shifts along carved limestone, the landscapes seem to breathe with memory, revealing patterns that emerge and vanish with the observer's perspective. The traces left by ancient hands speak of ingenuity, reverence, and adaptability, offering lessons in patience, observation, and humility. They are both markers of what was and invitations to what may yet be discovered. Even after centuries of investigation, much remains hidden, waiting for those willing to seek, to watch, and to listen. Beneath the waves, in soil, across limestone, and in memory, Michigan's ancient sites whisper questions rather than answers, urging us to embrace curiosity and wonder. And as we linger in these spaces, contemplating the lives, rituals, and knowledge encoded within, we realize that the story of these landscapes is far from complete, stretching endlessly into the imagination, the present, and the future. For in the mounds, stones, terraces, and carvings lies a promise that even when history is submerged, weathered, or worn, the human impulse to leave meaning in the world endures, and the mysteries of Michigan's ancient landscapes await discovery by those patient and attentive enough to notice. The journey is not merely to uncover the past, but to engage with it, to read the subtle language of stone, soil, and water, and to wonder what stories remain hidden, waiting silently beneath the surface of time. Leaving behind the weathered limestone and enigmatic carvings of Mackinac Island, our journey continues westward along Michigan's northern coastline, where dense forests and sparkling waters lead us to Grand Traverse Bay, a vast inlet of Lake Michigan, whose clear, frigid depths conceal secrets far older than the modern shoreline. On calm days, sunlight penetrates the surface, illuminating the lake's gentle swells and the rocky shallows near the bay's northern edges. But beneath the tranquil waters, something unusual lies hidden. A series of submerged stones arranged in what appears to be deliberate patterns. challenging assumptions about natural formation and human activity alike. This underwater stone formation has become a point of fascination for archaeologists, divers, and locals, inspiring careful study and cautious speculation. The site sits near the bay's northern tip, where the lake floor drops off gradually, revealing a scattering of stones at depths between 25 and 45 feet. From the surface, the formation is invisible except under the clearest water conditions, yet for those who have seen it, the arrangement is startling. Large, flat stones appear positioned in linear sequences, some forming angular clusters that resemble rudimentary walls or terraces. Smaller stones are interspersed, occasionally aligned with larger features in ways that suggest intention rather than random deposition. Divers describe a sense of symmetry and pattern in the placement, a subtle order that contrasts sharply with the surrounding irregular lakebed. Could these stones have been arranged by human hands, or are they simply the caprices of glacial and sedimentary forces? The debate remains unresolved, the ambiguity at the heart of the site's enduring mystery. The geological context of Grand Traverse Bay complicates interpretation. The lake itself was carved by glacial activity thousands of years ago, and retreating ice sheets deposited layers of gravel, sand, and boulders in ways that can produce deceptively ordered patterns. Yet some researchers argue that the scale and orientation of certain stones defy natural explanation. Measurements indicate straight lines exceeding 15 feet, precise angles that recur across the site, and clusters that appear uniformly spaced relative to one another. Could the formation represent an ancient shoreline structure, a ceremonial platform, or even a submerged settlement predating current estimates of regional habitation? If so, it suggests human activity at a time when the lake's water level was significantly lower, exposing areas now submerged beneath 20 to 40 feet of water. Evidence from underwater surveys has identified additional anomalies. Side-scan sonar reveals what appear to be terraced platforms, stone circles, and parallel alignments that do not conform to surrounding topography. Divers report encountering flat, slab-like stones that seem intentionally shaped, in some cases with surfaces smoothed in ways inconsistent with natural weathering. Pollen and sediment analysis suggests that when these structures were above water, the climate and ecology of the region supported both hunting and early agricultural activity, raising the possibility that human communities could have occupied these areas. Could the submerged stones be remnants of a settlement or ceremonial complex, lost to rising post-glacial waters? Historical context adds another layer to the mystery. Indigenous oral histories recount times when certain areas of Lake Michigan were dry or partially exposed, with rich forests and riverine systems connecting communities. Early European explorers recorded stories of ancestral hunting grounds, sacred sites, and submerged landscapes that had been reclaimed by water over centuries. Could the Grand Traverse Formation represent one such landscape, a remnant of human interaction with the land long before modern maps recorded the lake in its current configuration? If these stones were indeed placed intentionally, what purposes did they serve? Ritual, navigational, territorial, or perhaps a combination? Artifacts recovered near the edges of the formation provide tantalizing, if inconclusive, evidence. Flint fragments, fire-cracked rocks, and small bone tools have been found in shallow waters adjacent to the site, hinting at human presence. No large-scale habitation remains have been confirmed, but the possibility of structures built from perishable materials, now lost beneath sediment and water, cannot be discounted. Could these stones have served as foundation supports, platforms for shelters, or ceremonial markers, their original purpose obscured by the passage of time and rising waters? And if so, what might we learn from careful excavation or underwater mapping, considering the challenges posed by depth, visibility, and lake currents? The formation's alignment raises further questions. Some stones appear oriented along cardinal directions, while others may correspond to celestial events such as solstices or equinoxes. If these alignments are intentional, they suggest a sophisticated understanding of both terrestrial and celestial geography. Were the builders marking seasonal transitions for hunting, fishing, or ritual activity? Could the formation have served as a calendar or observatory, a tool to connect human activity with the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars? While these hypotheses remain speculative, they underscore the potential significance of the site beyond purely utilitarian purposes. Local divers describe a sense of otherworldly stillness at the site. Beneath the gentle waves, the stone formations evoke patterns reminiscent of terrestrial architecture: linear walls, rectangular enclosures, and circular arrangements that invite reflection on the lives of those who may have created them. Sediment has settled in depressions and gaps, preserving subtle impressions that hint at human modification. The patterns are not immediately obvious. They require time, patience, and perspective to discern. Could this deliberate concealment, intentional or accidental, have been part of the site's design, preserving sacred or practical spaces from casual observation? Scientific investigations have employed side-scan sonar, submersible drones, and 3D mapping to document the formation. These studies confirm a level of organization unusual for random glacial deposits. Several stones appear to be deliberately placed in parallel lines, while others form angular clusters reminiscent of courtyards or ceremonial spaces. The repetition of angles and spacing suggests an underlying plan, though whether it was functional, symbolic, or both is unknown. How might ancient communities have coordinated such construction beneath conditions challenging even to modern divers? And what does this say about the knowledge and organizational capacity of early inhabitants of northern Michigan? The formation also sparks more speculative discussions. Some researchers have proposed that it could represent an early form of maritime marker, guiding canoes and travelers along prehistoric waterways. Others suggest ceremonial purposes, connecting the physical landscape with spiritual practices linked to water, sun, or seasonal cycles. While evidence for these interpretations is circumstantial, the possibility that the formation served multiple purposes, practical, symbolic, and ritual, cannot be dismissed. And yet, without clear excavation or datable artifacts in situ, certainty remains elusive. Environmental changes continue to influence the site. Lake Michigan experiences seasonal fluctuations in water level, strong currents, and ice movement, all of which can obscure, rearrange, or damage submerged structures. How much of the formation as it exists today is original, and how much has been altered by the relentless forces of nature over millennia? Could the original structure have been more extensive, spanning areas now covered by deeper waters or sediment deposits? And what other submerged landscapes remain hidden, awaiting discovery beneath the lake's surface? The human imagination has long been drawn to submerged mysteries. Stories of lost villages, hidden ceremonial sites, and ancient pathways beneath the Great Lakes capture the mind as much as sonar images or diver observations. At Grand Traverse Bay, the underwater stone formation embodies this blend of the factual and the enigmatic. It is a reminder that the landscape of northern Michigan is not solely terrestrial. The waters themselves preserve traces of human activity, waiting for patient investigation to reveal them. Could this formation, and others like it, transform our understanding of prehistoric life along the Great Lakes? Even without definitive answers, the site encourages a contemplative approach. Observers are compelled to consider not just the stones themselves, but their relationship to the environment, water, and the communities who may have arranged them. Each stone could represent labor, intention, or ritual, a deliberate act frozen in time beneath the lake's surface. What knowledge, cultural practices, or spiritual beliefs might have guided these actions? And how much of that understanding has been lost, or is now encoded in ways we are only beginning to perceive. Standing at the water's edge, looking down through the clear depths where the stones lie, one cannot help but feel a sense of timeless presence. These formations speak of people who lived in harmony with their environment, adapting to rising waters, seasonal changes, and the challenges of life in a glacial landscape. They hint at knowledge encoded in rock, sediment, and water patterns, suggesting a worldview that combined utility, spirituality, and aesthetic sensibility. And yet, much of this knowledge remains inaccessible, preserved in the lake's still depths, whispering questions rather than offering answers. The underwater stone formation in Grand Traverse Bay challenges our assumptions about early human activity in northern Michigan. It invites us to reconsider the ways in which ancient communities interacted with lakes, rivers, and shorelines, constructing structures that were both functional and symbolic. How many more sites lie beneath the Great Lakes, hidden by water and time, waiting for careful observation and study? And what might these submerged landscapes tell us about the sophistication, beliefs, and ingenuity of the people who lived here long before written records? As sunlight dances across the water, casting shifting reflections onto the stones below, the formation seems almost alive, its patterns emerging and disappearing with the ripples. This interplay of light, stone, and water mirrors the enduring ambiguity of the site itself, a space at once comprehensible and elusive, familiar and alien. And though modern technology allows us to map and measure with precision, the formation retains a mysterious quality, a reminder that not all of human history is accessible through excavation or sonar, and that some knowledge remains intentionally or inevitably submerged, waiting for minds patient enough to notice its subtleties. Even after careful mapping, analysis, and discussion, the Grand Traverse Bay Formation resists simple explanation. Was it a ceremonial platform, a navigational guide, a defensive structure, or a combination of these? Were the stones placed by people responding to the rhythms of the lake, or by forces of nature interpreted as intentional by human observers? How many centuries did it take to arrange these stones, and how much knowledge about their construction has been lost to time? For now, the underwater stone formation remains an enduring enigma, a reminder that beneath Michigan's waters lie traces of lives, intentions, and mysteries that challenge our understanding of the past, inviting curiosity, reflection, and wonder. And as we continue our exploration of ancient Michigan, we are left with a compelling question. How much of history remains hidden beneath the surface, waiting for those willing to look beneath the waves and into the deep silence of time? Beneath the tranquil waters of Grand Traverse Bay, the submerged stones whisper of human presence that predates the modern shoreline, their deliberate arrangements hinting at centuries of thought, ritual, and labor, now largely lost to memory. Each formation, linear walls, angular clusters, and circular enclosures, offers fragments of an intricate story, yet conceals more than it reveals, leaving observers suspended between recognition and wonder. The very act of standing above these stones, peering through crystal-clear water to discern patterns that defy chance, becomes an invitation to contemplate the sophistication of communities whose knowledge of environment, water, and cosmos was far greater than we can fully grasp. The stone's placement suggests intentionality that bridges practical necessity and spiritual expression. Some appear to mark pathways, perhaps guiding ancient travelers along riverine and lake routes. Others may have served as ceremonial platforms, observatories aligned with solstices, or loci for ritual activity whose precise meaning remains obscured by millennia. The subtle repetition of angles, lines, and spacing hints at planning and coordination, evoking a culture with both social cohesion and a keen understanding of the natural world, a culture that engaged with its surroundings not merely for survival, but for symbolic resonance and enduring memory. Archaeological traces surrounding the formation, flint fragments, fire-cracked rocks, and small bone tools offer tantalizing evidence that human hands once shaped the landscape. Yet, unlike terrestrial structures or earthen mounds, these stones lie beneath layers of sediment, water, and time, their original context partially erased. The absence of perishable materials, such as wood or organic construction, means that much of the story exists only in subtle spatial patterns and indirect clues. The formations challenge observers to infer intention from ambiguity, to seek human agency in a landscape seemingly sculpted by both nature and deliberate design. Environmental forces have both preserved and concealed the site. Seasonal fluctuations in Lake Michigan, glacial remnants, ice movement, and sediment deposition have subtly reshaped the stones over millennia, altering their orientation and sometimes masking connections that were once evident. Yet, even after these changes, the formations maintain a sense of order and purpose, suggesting that what remains today is a faint echo of a more extensive network of human activity. Could entire ceremonial precincts, pathways, or settlements lie submerged beyond current visibility, waiting for patient investigation to uncover the full extent of prehistoric ingenuity? Indigenous oral histories lend layers of cultural resonance to the submerged formations. Stories of ancestral hunting grounds, sacred waters, and landscapes partially exposed in times of lower water levels hint at continuity between human activity and the natural environment over thousands of years. These narratives reinforce the possibility that the stones were not isolated structures, but part of a lived cultural and spiritual landscape, one where relationships between humans, water, land, and cosmos were carefully observed and ritually acknowledged. Modern technological tools, from side-scan sonar to submersible drones and 3D mapping, have revealed patterns invisible to the naked eye. Terraced platforms, linear alignments, and clusters reminiscent of courtyards or ceremonial enclosures. Even so, the interpretation remains elusive. Was the design functional, symbolic, or a combination of both? Did these arrangements encode knowledge of astronomical cycles, seasonal resource management, or social hierarchy? Or were they primarily spiritual, guiding communal rituals and fostering continuity between the living and the ancestral? Each hypothesis opens new vistas of thought while underscoring the profound mystery that surrounds these stones. The alignments of certain stones with cardinal directions, distant topographical features, or potential solar events hint at knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and environmental cycles. Such precision would have required observation, planning, and perhaps ritualized labor, suggesting a sophisticated worldview in which the terrestrial and celestial were intertwined. The stones may have functioned simultaneously as calendar markers, ceremonial sites, and spatial anchors in a landscape inhabited by humans attuned to its seasonal, astronomical, and ecological rhythms. For the observer, the experience is both humbling and disorienting. Standing at the water's edge, watching sunlight dance across the lake and illuminate the formations below, one senses a connection across time, a bridge to those who shaped these stones, whose lives, intentions, and ceremonies remain largely invisible. The stones exude quiet authority, commanding respect without proclamation, their meaning revealed only through careful observation, reflection, and imagination. They remind us that history is often hidden in subtle patterns, waiting for those patient enough to discern its traces. Even after decades of study, debate, and technological exploration, the Grand Traverse Bay Formation resists definitive explanation. Was it a ritual complex, a navigational guide, a settlement foundation, or an amalgamation of these functions? How much knowledge has been lost, submerged beneath water, sediment, and centuries of human and natural change? These questions remain open, yet their very ambiguity is part of the formation's enduring allure, a mystery that invites curiosity, reflection, and engagement with the ancient minds who shaped this landscape. Ultimately, the submerged stones stand as silent sentinels of human ingenuity, belief, and memory, echoing the mounds and earthworks of northern Michigan in their capacity to inspire awe and contemplation. They urge us to reconsider the boundaries of history, to explore the connections between land, water, and culture, and to imagine worlds shaped by intelligence, ritual, and reverence long before written records existed. And as the waves ripple across the bay, casting light and shadow over stone and sediment alike, we are left with the lingering, thrilling question: what other secrets lie hidden beneath the Great Lakes, and who among us will be patient enough to discover them, listening carefully to the silent testimony of time itself? As the waters of Grand Traverse Bay ripple gently in the morning light, we turn our attention southward, following the contours of Michigan's inland waterways, where forests meet open fields and rivers carve their way toward Lake Michigan. Here, along the banks of the Grand River, lies a landscape that has borne witness to centuries of human activity, quietly preserving secrets beneath grass and soil. Among these are the Grand River burial mounds, earthworks whose presence is both imposing and enigmatic, silent testaments to the lives and beliefs of the region's earliest inhabitants. To stand at the edge of one of these mounds is to feel time fold in upon itself, a layered history stretching back thousands of years, inviting contemplation and careful observation. The mounds rise subtly from the surrounding terrain, their grassy slopes blending almost seamlessly with the gentle undulations of the river valley. Yet, upon closer inspection, the careful construction of these earthen forms becomes evident. Some mounds are circular, perfectly proportioned, while others form elongated ridges or clustered groupings. The soil, compacted in layers, suggests intentional human design rather than natural accumulation, and in places, subtle depressions hint at burial pits beneath the surface. The scale of the mounds varies, from modest elevations only a few feet high to larger structures that dominate the immediate landscape, commanding both attention and respect. Dating these mounds presents a challenge. Unlike stone monuments or petroglyphs, organic remains within burial sites can offer radiocarbon data, but much of the material has been disturbed over centuries by both natural erosion and human activity. Still, archaeological investigations place some of the Grand River mounds within the Woodland period, approximately 1000 BC to 1000 AD, a time marked by increasing social complexity, trade networks, and ritual practices across the Great Lakes region. These structures, whether single burials or communal cemeteries, suggest a society deeply invested in the care of its dead and in shaping the landscape to reflect spiritual or social priorities. Artifacts recovered from nearby sites offer further insight. Pottery fragments, stone tools, and ornamental objects, some meticulously carved or decorated, indicate communities with sophisticated material culture. Yet the mounds themselves raise more questions than answers. Why were certain mounds larger or more elaborately shaped than others? Were these distinctions linked to status, clan affiliation, or spiritual significance? And what rituals accompanied their construction and ongoing use? Unlike the visible carvings of Mackinac Island or the underwater stone formations of Grand Traverse Bay, these mounds convey their stories subtly, through form, placement, and scale, leaving much to the imagination and careful analysis of modern observers. The orientation of the mounds offers tantalizing hints of deliberate alignment. Some are arranged in linear sequences following the flow of the river, while others appear positioned to frame distant hills, forests, or celestial events, such as the rising sun during solstices. Could these alignments reflect a symbolic connection between the living and the dead, between earthly landscapes and cosmic cycles? The recurrence of similar patterns in other burial mound complexes across the Great Lakes region suggests that such placement was intentional, not accidental, and that the builders may have possessed sophisticated knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and environmental observation. Beyond the physical evidence, local indigenous traditions provide additional layers of context. Oral histories recount the Grand River Valley as a sacred space where ancestors were honored and the natural world was seen as imbued with spiritual significance. These narratives describe ceremonies and rituals that celebrated the interconnectedness of life and death, water and land, human and spirit. Could the mounds have served as more than resting places for the dead? Perhaps they functioned as ritual centers, points of communal gathering, or markers of territorial boundaries, simultaneously practical and symbolic in purpose. Excavations and surveys have revealed intriguing anomalies within some mounds. In certain sites, burial pits contain multiple layers of interments, sometimes with carefully positioned grave goods, suggesting complex mortuary practices. In other instances, human remains appear arranged in patterns that may reflect social hierarchy, cosmological beliefs, or ceremonial conventions. The degree of variation between mounds complicates interpretation. Were these differences due to temporal changes in practice, regional diversity, or the unique status of the individuals interred? And if so, what does this reveal about the social and spiritual organization of early communities along the Grand River? Environmental factors continue to shape the preservation of these mounds. Seasonal flooding, soil erosion, and agricultural activity have altered the landscape, sometimes obscuring original features or damaging delicate structures. Yet despite these challenges, many mounds retain remarkable integrity, their shapes and orientations discernible from both ground-level observation and aerial imagery. Modern technologies, including LiDAR scanning and geophysical surveys, have revealed previously hidden substructures, pathways, and soil disturbances, opening new avenues for understanding these sites without disturbing their sacred contents. Could further non-invasive study uncover patterns or networks connecting mounds along the river, suggesting coordinated planning over large geographic areas? Speculative theories also emerge from observation. Some researchers propose that certain mound arrangements may correspond to cosmological or ritualistic maps, aligning not only with celestial events, but also with significant geographic or resource points along the river. Others suggest that clusters of mounds might mark ancient pathways, trade routes, or fishing grounds, integrating practical life with spiritual significance. While such interpretations remain unconfirmed, they highlight the mound's potential as multifunctional features, blurring the line between the material and the symbolic, the living and the ancestral. Visitors often remark on the imposing quiet of the mound sites. Unlike petroglyphs or stone structures, these earthworks exude a sense of understated authority, their presence felt rather than loudly declared. Walking among them, one can almost imagine the ceremonies that took place, the careful layering of soil, the placement of offerings, and the chants or songs that may have accompanied these acts. Each mound becomes not just a marker of death, but a focal point for memory, reverence, and continuity across generations. What stories, hidden in the contours of earth and the arrangements of graves, have yet to be uncovered? The relationship between mounds also invites reflection. While some are solitary, others exist in small clusters, suggesting social or familial grouping. Could these spatial arrangements indicate kinship networks, communal alliances, or ritual precincts? The variations in size and complexity may reflect differences in rank, accomplishment, or spiritual role within the community. And yet, the lack of written records leaves these interpretations tentative, reliant on careful extrapolation from patterns, artifacts, and comparative studies of other woodland period sites. Archaeologists are also intrigued by the potential subsurface connections between mounds. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed anomalies that suggest tunnels, pits, or other features hidden beneath the surface. Were these part of ceremonial practices, storage areas, or structural supports? And if so, What was their role in the broader social or spiritual life of the communities that built them? These unseen layers add to the mystery, hinting at practices deliberately concealed from casual observation, perhaps intended only for those initiated into specific rites or knowledge. The Grand River mounds also raise broader questions about the relationship between humans and the landscape. Placed along the river, these earthworks demonstrate a keen awareness of topography, hydrology, and visibility. Did the builders choose locations for symbolic, practical, or both reasons? How did seasonal flooding, hunting patterns, and resource availability influence their placement? And what does this reveal about the sophisticated environmental knowledge possessed by woodland period communities? Even after centuries of study, the mounds retain an aura of mystery. Their construction reflects intentionality and social cohesion, yet the exact meanings of their forms, orientations, and associated artifacts remain largely speculative. Could they encode knowledge of astronomy, ancestral lineage, or spiritual cosmology? Were they intended to impress, instruct, or protect? And what insights about human belief, ingenuity, and adaptation might be gleaned from careful observation and study without disturbing the integrity of these sacred sites? The Grand River burial mounds, like the underwater stone formations of Grand Traverse Bay, remind us that history is not always visible at first glance. They invite a slower, more contemplative engagement with the landscape, encouraging observers to ask questions, note patterns, and consider multiple layers of meaning. Each mound is a testament to human agency, memory, and reverence, a silent but powerful connection between past and present. Some stories were never meant to be fully uncovered. Beneath the surface of recorded history, there are gaps, silent places where evidence disappears, witnesses contradict themselves, and entire events seem to dissolve into uncertainty. What if the truth was never lost, only hidden? In this journey, we explore some of the most concealed and unsettling mysteries ever documented, cases that continue to defy explanation even decades or centuries later. From unexplained disappearances to anomalies that challenge logic itself, each moment pulls us deeper into the unknown. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the shadows together.